Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. You've always hated Whitechapel. I mean, especially right now while it's thundering down cats and dogs. Thank God for top hats, keeping the top of your head dry. But Whitechapel in the rain is even worse than Whitechapel in the dry. You would much rather be safely at the Diogenes Club right now, feet up, brandy in one hand, cigar in the other, listening to someone play the harpsichord or tell a tale, watching the high and mighty rub shoulders with academics. That is the kind of place where people value, well, people of good standing, honesty, and, well, let's say the finer things in life. That is not Whitechapel. Whitechapel is the opposite of that. You can tell because everywhere you look, there's a new cutthroat, a pickpocket, a cut purse, a potential burglar. In alcoves, doorways, windows, there are women plying their particular trade. And, all right, you linger a little while looking at some of them showing things that frankly shouldn't be shown in Victorian England, but you don't linger for too long because there's always someone watching, someone waiting to catch you out, put your name in the papers and disgrace you. Satire is a very big thing right now, and it's frankly insufferable. No, you look straight ahead, you know where you've got to go, and frankly, this isn't your first time in Whitechapel. Yes, you've been here for illicit reasons before, but you don't want to go into them. Let's keep trudging forward, trying to avoid the deepest puddles. There's planks that stretch across the street in some places to keep your boots dry. The fact is, the predators of Whitechapel, as much as they are predatory, are not the worst predators you've encountered before. When you took that ship all the way from Lisbon to Le Havre just 2 years ago, well, at first everyone thought that the crew were coming down with a mystery sickness. It was only when you started having nightmares of a scuttling creature that was invading the cabins of passengers and crew alike and draining the life from them that you presented your findings, superstitious as they were, to the rest of the crew and the passengers. You called them all out and you told them, "We are in danger. There is a creature on board the ship." They laughed at you. And so, that night, when you felt that the creature was about to arrive in your cabin for its last drink, you took a rowing boat, some call it a lifeboat, from the side of the ship, and you took your chances on the coast of Spain. Sure enough, when you arrived in Le Havre, well, the ship had not. It was only a couple of months later that they found it sailing adrift. Rumours have it that the entire crew were, some of them, yes, dead from what looked like disease, but others had been utterly drained of blood. Some had even had their organs sucked out of them, was how one doctor put it rather crudely. So yes, you're familiar with predators, and you've encountered others since, and this is the reason you're in Whitechapel right now, not to mix with burglars and thieves, but because your friends called you here to Plum Lane via a messenger boy saying there's something you must see, something predatory. Well, here you are now. You arrive at the house. The doorway is already open. You can see your friends, some of them standing outside, pale-faced, smoking, drinking, otherwise grave. You walk straight in. You expect you know what you're going to find, and yet it's worse than you imagine. There's no way one body creates that much blood. Oh, there's a body on the floor, all right. It's a young woman, and you recognize her immediately, despite the fact she's been slit from bow to stern. She was your apprentice. You think your best guess? You're a doctor. You know these things. The blood that has lacquered this floor, the walls, even parts of the ceiling, every piece of upholstery, every fixture and fitting, must be from at least 8 bodies. And you know this isn't a coincidence. She did not suddenly produce this. No. You are fairly certain who this predator is, who this monster is that's killed her and left her in a pool of 8 people's blood. And you know it's a warning. No, not a warning, a mockery. It's to say, I can reach you and anyone you care about, and what's more, I can kill even more people and you will never catch me. There will be more death to come, and you will be able to do nothing to stop it. You're not going to be beaten like that. You step into the building. Your feet squelch on the saturated carpet. You kneel down to the body and you start looking for clues. In today's episode, we are reviewing Stokerverse, a horror role-playing game by Nightfall Games. Nightfall Games you may be familiar with from Slay Industries and Slay Industries 2nd Edition, the Terminator RPG, among others. Now, Stokerverse is an absolutely fantastic horror game. Yes, I know, right now I am very busy promoting Curseborn. Don't not back Curseborn, but Stokerverse is a very different kind of horror game, and I really wanted to bring it to your attention. I've been wanting to talk about it for ages. I just recently got done running a campaign, a pretty lengthy one, and the players loved it. They found that this setting was about the most immersive setting they had ever played in. The artwork in the book by Clint Langley, a lot of it. Clint Langley is a legend in art, and I mean, I recommend you look up some of his pieces. This is not a book where I'm going to be doing much opening it and showing you pages, though I will do it on occasion. Look, I'm doing it right now. The artwork in Stokerverse is stunning, just absolutely stunning, and the writing as well by Chris McCauley, he was the lead writer on this one, is again fantastic. What it does is present a horror game that is in the late 19th century, where Bram Stoker's work is all true, and so too is the horror work of many other authors of the time. So your Griffin, Invisible Man, your Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, your werewolves, your phantoms, your shadows, your vampires, all of that is real. The White Worm is real. Now, if you're familiar with my work, you may think, well, that sounds very similar to Trinity Continuum Aether, but the main difference, is one of genre. Trinity Continuum Aether is firmly in the camp of urban fantasy, if you like, crossed with steampunk, where you are manipulating aether to give yourself, let's call them magical abilities, that can ultimately mutate you, turn you into abominations known as magogs. Well, Stokerverse, while it occupies a similar setting, it's the late 19th century, and all of those classical fiction works, those gothic works, are true. This is a firm horror game. Oh, this is a grisly horror game, and you have to have a certain palate to enjoy it, but I think a lot of you, being fans of vampires, you're subscribed to my channel, will like it. What does Stokerverse contain? Well, first and foremost, and this is one of the big ones, it contains a rich amount of setting information. I don't just mean that's fun to read. It has a hell of a lot of utility. That may not sound very exciting, but for me, as a GM and as a writer, I love utility in a game, where it provides me with so many little aspects, treats, tips, bits and pieces about London and other places in the late 19th century that I can just pull from my game, or pull from my book and put in my game very, very easily, is incredibly useful. Things like maps, letters, all these little story hooks littered, not only in the beginning of the book, although there is a lot of it concentrated there, but scattered throughout, is fantastic. It is exactly what I like out of a game, especially a horror game, where setting is so important and atmosphere is really significant. It is also a game that contains a massive flurry, I'm going to jump all the way to the back of the book now, of antagonists and notable characters from this fiction. So you can very easily make Stokerverse a book about characters going up against Dracula, and it doesn't cheapen it at all. My game, the campaign that I ran of Stokerverse, did have the players ultimately going up against Dracula himself, and I've got to tell you, it was a lot more interesting than going up against Strahd. Nothing against the Curse of Strahd, but there is something quite epic about facing off against Dracula and being able to present him in a terrifying way, as he is in Bram Stoker's Dracula and, of course, Stokerverse. So you have tools to run a game. You have adversaries to place against your protagonists. What do the players do? Well, your players will create their characters using the archetypes presented in the book, unless you want to create your own, and that is pretty damn easy. And it uses the S5S system that is familiar to anyone who has played Slay Industries before. I will give you an example of how it plays out, because I think these are always useful. It's a D10-based system. And let us use an example of... Let's go back to our fiction example. We're in Whitechapel. Let's say we're trying to creep through Whitechapel. Maybe we've got the trail of the monster that left all that blood in the house. Maybe they only left it there within an hour. And so you are trying to pick up the trail, and you do so. And now you're trying to creep up to see who this hunched over figure with their high collar and their top hat happens to be. Is it going to be Jack the Ripper? Is it going to be someone else? We will find out in a moment. But first, let's see if we can sneak up on them. So we're going to be using stealth. Stealth is a skill. Dexterity is a statistic. So, much like in other games, you might have dexterity as an attribute and stealth as a skill, or similar characteristics and skills. You get the idea. Anyway, so first things first, dexterity is going to have a rating, typically between 1 and 6. Let's say our character has a dexterity rating of 2, not the most stealthy in the world, but not terrible. And let's say I have put, because stealth is a dexterity skill, let's say I've only put 1 rank into my stealth skill. Okay, so right now that gives me a bonus of 3. 2 for dex, 1 for stealth. Now, what do I get in terms of my dice roll? First things first, I always roll 1 die. This is my success die to determine whether I succeed. That is a 1d10. I roll it. I add my bonus to it. If I beat the difficulty, I have successfully stealthed this individual. Now, there is an additional roll to come to see whether I'm able to do anything else, whether this is a superlative stealth roll, whether it only works on my next action, then everything goes to hell. This is the roll of my skill dice, my ranks. So I mentioned I had 1 in stealth. Everyone always gets a chance die on top of it. So that means I'm now rolling 2d10. Yes, I have succeeded on my stealth, because let's say the difficulty here was a 10, and I rolled on 11. But now I'm rolling 2d10, plus my bonus of 3. So, first one I roll is a 5. Add 3 to it, 8. That does not beat the difficulty. Maybe I roll my next one, which would normally be my chance die. And in this case, I roll a 9, plus my bonus of 3. That's a 12. So I get a success on my success die, which is vitally important. I get a success on my skill die, which is going to grant me something extra. Maybe, not only do I creep up on him, I can anticipate where he's going, and so I can loop ahead to an alley in front and then bash him over the head with something, or signal someone else. Let out a very low whistle or make a hand signal that lets one of my teammates know to come across from in front, or walk across the rooftops and jump down. That kind of thing. Every time you succeed with a skill die, your roll gets better. As you know, I'm very fond of the StoryPath Ultra system. There is something very similar going on here. It is especially pertinent in combat situations where each additional skill die that succeeds is going to do additional damage or allow you to hit certain limbs, that kind of thing. Now, Stokerverse is a game where your characters do not have to be heroic. There are all kinds of archetypes which are pretty damn morally dubious, and my players had a lot of fun with those. It's a game where you are able to explore the works of not only Stoker, as mentioned, but also other classical lyricists of the early through to late 19th century, your Mary Shelleys, your Dickenses, and so on. It is a game that contains all manner of cults and factions that you can join. There is a cult of the White Worm, there is a cult of the Serpent, there is the Diogenes Club, there are the Knights Templar. These all exist in the world of Stokerverse, and I really, really recommend you check this game out. It is a beautiful game. I have one flaw, and I'm going to point it out because, as we know, I don't do reviews without quotation marks. I can't tell you that this game is going to, make your world or break it. I can tell you it's a lot of fun, but I have found a flaw, and usually I don't point these out, but I'm going to do it here right now. This game really needs an interactive character sheet, and Nightfall have PDFs on their website for all of their games. As far as I know, they've got character sheets for all of their games except this one, so I would love to have one. It would be a huge amount of help for my players who work off of tablets and laptops and things like that. So, in fact, even one that can be printed would be handy, but an interactive one would just be superb. You can buy this book in PDF or in print. Now, unlike my recent review of Cowboy Bebop or my review of Werewolf 5th Edition, I have got no attachment to Stokerverse whatsoever. Werewolf I worked on for a while. Cowboy Bebop I wrote a scenario for. Stokerverse, all I have done is run it extensively, and I can tell you that the system, it works. I use this system incredibly often for Slay Industries games too, so I'm very familiar with it. Based on some of the dice pool mechanics, it might be unfamiliar to you if you're more familiar with games like D&D, but it is something you will get the hang of very, very quickly. My one recommendation to you, players, listeners, viewers, especially the people running these games, is when you're in combat, make sure you make every single character important. Give everyone something to do. This is not a game that should be run like a tactical game where everyone is just rolling to see how much damage they do and shave off damage each time. This is a game where every character should be important, especially the antagonists. Make sure you give each antagonist a different way of acting. They're not all going to run up like angry werewolves and claw. One is going to be stealthy. One is going to have a cruel scar down his face that shows himself up to be something. One is going to be more charming, maybe going to try and mentally manipulate you. Another one is going to try and abduct someone and drag them away to cause a distraction. One might be up high in a window, one might be on your level, and one might be using cover. My point is, the system that this game uses, that Slay Industries uses, is one where combat can get very granular and in a way that I find very enjoyable, because I attach narrative to each of those grains to make the combat interesting and interactive. But if you are the kind of GM who is only looking at dice rolls, I would argue this system becomes granular and, well, not unwieldy, but bogged down because of the amount of dice rolling that's taking place. It isn't particularly any more or less than any other game, don't get me wrong, but things like the initiative system, where first you basically declare your actions in reverse order and then you act in the correct order, it can make the game slow down if the GM is not on the ball and prepared to call the action in an exciting and interesting way. So that's my piece of advice for running Stokerverse. Make things dynamic and suspenseful, tense. That's what you want out of Stokerverse. Anyway, do pick it up. You can pick it up from the Nightfall website, or you can pick it up from, I think, DriveThruRPG. I'll link it below. And thank you so much for watching. And of course, I look forward to hearing about your Curseborn game set in the 19th century as well, which families were prominent then. Maybe we'll do a crossover. Maybe I'll do a crossover. A Curseborn game that has the monsters from Bram Stoker and other works. Okay. I'm going to look into that. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.